Jamie, we'll jump on to you now. I guess one of the feedback, just to provide some context to this question, one of the feedback I get from people, including in my own firm, is accountants are not used to marketing. As Ed said, it is an investment. It is a cost. It is an investment. I'd love to hear you on this topic. If someone's sitting on the fence about whether or not they should do it because they might know a colleague who's wasted a lot of money and not got much return on it, you're really focused on ensuring that your marketing activity at Sky Accountants provides a steady and increasing source of quality leads into the practice. Can you go into some detail of some of the things that have been successful in achieving this, and what are you looking for to make sure that your investment, as Ed rightly calls it, is yielding the results that you need to make it worthwhile in the first place?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I'll probably wind back. So before I started working with Ed, it's probably like a lot of other firms. We would start marketing, do it for a couple of months, and then we'd stop. We'd do it ad hoc and stop and start and stop and start, and it was just never consistent. And then, once I started working with Ed those years ago, Ed explained it to me in this way, and Ed said that it's like marketing's like a massive concrete ball, and it takes a fair bit of effort to get it going. And so you've got to push the ball, but once the ball's rolling, it's easier to tap it along and keep it going. And that's how Ed explained marketing to me in that analogy. And ever since then, so we've kept the marketing up consistently since then. We didn't really drop the ball. So I think one of the most important things for firms, taking it from my experience, is just be consistent. You must be consistent with your marketing. The other part of that is have a niche. Very important to have a niche, because it doesn't matter what clients you speak to, they all think that no one else understands their industry, and they like dealing with a specialist.
Yeah.
So that was something that we did as well in that niche. Now, I get the question a lot of the times, what about other, do we take clients or leads from other industries? Well, of course you do, because you'll get referrals, and you'll just get people that'll find your website and find an article on, a different sort of industry. So yes, of course you take those, but what you do with your marketing is you just, instead of a shotgun approach, you want to drive that niche, if you like. And some of the firms recently that we've worked with in the US, they're very successful because they've either, focused on the vets, for example, they're focused on pharmacies or whatever. So in terms of your sort of slide there, talking about driving quality leads, that's a big part of the process to drive quality leads. And then, so from that, then it's really determining, well, what is a quality lead? Now, you'll get a lot of tire kickers. Some of my client managers they used to complain about, I rang that person, I didn't ring back, and so forth. So you've really got to have a system in place to say, well, what is an actual lead? Because what you'll find is once you start measuring the teams and measuring the client managers, they'll get quite competitive in terms of their percentage of leads that they're converting to clients. And so it's important that, they don't see every new lead as a tire kicker, if I can put it like that. And then it's a proper lead. So, we, after sort of talking to Ed about it over the years, we see it as a proper lead, or a qualified lead, as someone who's willing to have an appointment. Someone who's willing to book an appointment and have a discussion. So, that's different for every firm, but you want to drive quality leads. And there's some of the sort of tips that we use. And, these days we'd get 35 to 40 leads per month, and just measure it. That's very important extremely important to measure it, to see, return on investment on your marketing, and then fine tune it, measure it. And then, once you get the leads coming in, are you converting them? So again, measure it, and no one ever has time to measure it, but you've got to make time as the firm owner and as it grows, because, you can spend, I think, Ed always says, spend around 4 to 5% of your turnover on marketing. And it definitely works, but that analogy of just being persistent with it is extremely important, because if you stop and start, it doesn't work.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. I've noticed that. I mean, I'm guilty of this in my own firm from time to time, and I've noticed that even some decent sized mid-tier firms, they'll have their latest blog post will be from 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And yeah. When you say you measure the leads, Jamie, is it just the number of leads that you're measuring, or are you measuring the quality as well? And if you are measuring the quality, do you have some kind of criteria? Because I could imagine, I've got a couple of client managers. I can imagine one of them blaming, I shouldn't say it's because it's getting recorded, but I can imagine one of my client managers blaming the quality of the lead if they're unable to convert it, and say, oh, that was a rubbish lead. Like, I don't get good ones. So do you measure both those things? And if you do, how do you measure quality?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because I had the same thing. That's a crap lead. That's a terrible lead. So as I said, you've got to qualify what is a good lead. For us, after speaking to Ed about it and the client managers, was someone that was willing to just have a phone appointment or just a Zoom call, for example.
Yeah.
But in saying that, it's very important to respond quickly. While you say, well, they're happy to book an appointment, it can't be in 2 days' time. Right?
You mean the client manager?
That's right.
Yeah.
So whatever your system is, the quicker the lead is booked in for an appointment, the better. There's a lot of research around how long people will wait. So if you get a lead and they say, yeah, look, I'm happy to speak to someone, and the further out you book them in, the less likely they are to turn up, and they'll say, oh, I found another bookkeeper, or I found another accountant. So there's some really good advice in the Wize Vault in the sales section around this. There's actually some statistics on, consumers' expectations on how fast, an inquiry should be replied to. I think it's up to like 80% within the first 2 hours. So it's really important that, coming back to Ed talks about context, is making sure that your teams have capacity. So at the start of each financial year, we do a lot of work with the senior client managers around making sure that they've got capacity in order to take new clients on. We've got one team at the moment. We're still looking for another accountant, and they've just sort of put the pause button on the leads for the moment, and letting the other 3 teams take the leads, because you want to have the ability to service those new leads. So you must create capacity, and that comes back to that capacity planner, and then having the right people on each team. So everything is interrelated, as it always is. But yeah, certainly I love the concept of, you mentioned, Tim, about what do you measure? So things that we measure, and you put me on the spot here because I've got to remember, but, we measure the number of leads per month, the website traffic, also our database growth. So another one, so we measure, we do have a newsletter that's sort of on our website, and the more people we get to subscribe to that, the better. It's quite interesting too. You see the hits to the website, and some months you see like there's a real spike, and and a particular topic. It's interesting to see that attracts the attention of your database. What else is there? So Google Analytics. Our marketing person has a deep dive into the Google Analytics. So and then just the other really important thing, Tim, to measure is, well, where are the leads coming from? Because you've got PPC, or pay per click, you've got SEO, you've got referrals, you've got all sorts of. So it's very important to measure, well, where are the leads coming from? And even at Wize Mentoring, Brenton gives us a report every week on exactly where the leads are coming from: LinkedIn, Facebook. So you just got to sort of those half a dozen things that you track, and the more sophisticated you get at it, the better. But it takes time. You got to be patient, and once, as the firm owner, once you get more time, you can work on these things, and then keep improving the business and keep growing it.
Yeah, no, I love it. I'm getting that time with the metaphor of the concrete ball as well. But like we always say at Wize, be persistent and consistent. It's no different to the other design and recruit stages, as long as you have your map and you know where you're headed, and you're consistent, you'll get the results in the long term. Yeah.